Hey, Cynthia.
Hey, Liz. Good to see you.
It's so good to see your face. It's been a while.
Yes, it has. But it seems like in another way, we've been together too. I mean, you're one of those people, you're in my heart all the time, you
It's
know?
true for me too. I'm always kind of having an ongoing conversation with you. So, like, wonder what Cynthia would think about this. Well, so actually, that's why we're chatting today. I have these burning questions for you. And we always thought that maybe people would enjoy these conversations too. So
Yes.
we're recording.
And we don't know what we're about to say.
Yeah.
So it's
Anything
unrehearsed.
could happen, right?
We're off the script. Yeah.
So I was sharing off camera. I've had a wild few months that we'll get into.
Yeah.
What's the last quarter been like for you?
So you mean the last quarter of 2021?
Yeah, what was it like for you?
For me, it was epic relief because personally, I had just cleared this long COVID
Oh,
in the first half of 2021. So I was still riding high on a wave of not only am I alive, but I'm not being tortured every day, of with the long COVID experience. So I was feeling very blessed. And then suddenly I just started getting deluged. There was a lot of stuff going on, and I was getting so much, when sometimes you're connected, super connected
yeah.
with like everybody's trying to reach you. And that was happening. And I thought, okay, they all know I got better, or else there's just a whole lot of stuff happening, and so that was also happening for me, but I didn't have the things that were going on for you, thank goodness.
Well, I remember that for you. That's right. You had a bunch of interviews all in a
Yes.
row, Gaia and all of that.
Yeah, I
Oh,
got
that was
invited to
fun.
Gaia and Michael Sandler, so there was a lot going on, and it was good, being with Regina Meredith and Michael Sandler. They're both wonderful beings, they're angelic and fun, and so informative too.
Yeah, those are amazing conversations.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the funnest thing. I think that's why it's so fun for us to talk to each other. You get to talk to people who think about things on a different wavelength,
That's right.
weird and strange topics. It's always so fun.
And I had fun stuff happening with wildlife too,
Ooh,
including,
sure.
yeah, like I started making deeper friendships with some animals that I had thought were annoying, like the squirrel that would pick the
Oh,
apples off the apple tree. One day I was just sitting in the backyard and just watching. I was in a position, so I was perfectly still. I'd been meditating, not moving. And then a squirrel came down the apple tree it had selected one of the apples and it had a little apple in its mouth. And it's hopping the way they do. And it started digging. And I thought, wow, I finally get to see where they put their little food for the winter. And then I watched it bury a couple of apples. And then finally I thought I need to go inside because I've just been sitting here perfectly still for a long time. I didn't want to traumatize the little guy.
oh
But
yeah.
when I stood up, it was just gently and calmly, just thinking to it, like, you're fine. And then I went in the house and I looked outside like 20 minutes later and I saw, this was really surprising. There was an apple that was not there before, perfect big apple at the foot of the chair, right where I'd been sitting.
Oh,
It's amazing because it was picking the little apples to bury and it found the best one and brought it to me. The
oh
next
my
day,
gosh.
there was also an apple, the best apple. So it gave me the two best apples off the trees and put them next to my chair. And then it gets even more bizarre in a good way. I was on a walk like a few days later, and a woman who I don't know was riding her bicycle as I'm walking along the woods. And I'm just walking, and she's bicycling. She slows her bike to a stop. She looks at me, and I do not know this woman. And she said, "Have you seen any amazing animals recently?" And
Wow,
we got
what
to
a weird
talking.
question.
I know, like out of nowhere. So I'm talking to her, and then I mentioned eventually got onto the subject of the squirrel. There's also cool stuff happening with the gopher, but I told her about the squirrel and she said, I didn't tell her about the best apple part. She said that. She said, don't you love how they always bring you the best apples? And I'm like,
That is
yes,
just strange.
but in a good way. And
Yeah,
that was
beautifully.
also the fourth quarter of 2021.
Wow. Now that's interesting. Any thoughts on why or
I feel like and maybe we're going to get into this and this whole business of what's happening and the upgrade that's going on, what's happening globally. I didn't ask had she been sick lately or anything. I think actually she seemed tuned in. She seemed like someone who recognized me as likely being someone who would talk to fairies, elves. That's true. Trees, true.
Yeah.
Squirrels, yes. Gophers, yes. Anyway, so I think that's what happened is she could see it on me. She could see it in my energy field. So she slowed to a stop, completely stopped, and then wanted to talk to me. You know, for people that can read energy, they can feel some of these things in the field. So, but it was amazing that it happened and amazing the conversation.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about that is we observe animals, you know, gophers, birds, butterflies, but we don't think generally that they're observing us back.
Right.
Right. So that squirrel was observing you, aware of you.
Yes.
You know, enough to think about you to give you a gift. That's incredible. It's so wild.
The gopher does similar things. I used to think that I used to have the opinion of the gopher that our family dog did back when we had our family dog. He passed away. He's been gone a number of years now. And the gophers used to be an annoyance. I used to think, oh, brother, another gopher hole. But what I learned this last year, especially fourth quarter, was noticing it was time, once the rain started, then I decided, okay, I'm going to aerate the soil. So I got out the soil aerator. I do it by foot, by hand, whatever. So I'm out there punching holes in the ground. But I noticed I don't need to do this. I don't need to do this at all because that gopher had perfectly aerated the entire lawn area. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
So we've got a groundskeeper.
Yeah, you got to grow. You know, I tend to think there's so many things happening right now. So many things available. That's kind of my favorite word. Right now, that everything's available. And that interaction with you and the gopher, as strange as it is, it also doesn't seem strange at all. It seems perfectly available now.
Yes.
That somehow, and I don't think it's them, I think it's us. Now there's this awareness that we could have an interaction.
That what we're thinking and feeling is being understood by the squirrel, by the gopher. They're helping. It's like, oh, you want the soil aerated? I can do that. Because the gophers never used to do that, by the way. I should explain. In our lawn, they would have runways. And so they'd have the area, you could call it aerated, but I never thought of it that way. I think, oh gosh, big holes here.
Yeah.
And then there'd be the areas that we've got a clay soil problem going on here. So it's like hard pan. That's why you have to wait till it rains to punch holes in the soil so the plants can get their roots down better. Anyway, but now this is a new development, really. This has never happened in all the years I've lived here. So yes, you're right.
It's so interesting. I think that the energy is shifting and changing, and those of us who are moving along with it, right along with, are having more and more of these kinds of experiences. I haven't had any of those with animals, but I've kind of been in the whole working here. So I'm not interacting, but I'll have to pay attention because that's interesting.
Super interesting. Yes.
Yeah. Did you have anything else at the end of the year or even over the first of the year? Anything else unusual? I mean, I know you always have unusual.
Always something unusual.
Unusual. Let me rephrase. Unusual for you.
Gosh, can't think of it offhand. So it just seems like it was good. It was very uplifting. I was still riding the high wave of I'm still healthy, knock wood, but it's still good. So feeling good, being able to donate blood again, which I love to do. There's been a shortage, so really feeling good about that, way to contribute. Yeah.
Acknowledging good health. I mean, when you have been sick for a long time, that feeling of, wait a minute, I feel good today.
Yes.
It's almost foreign, and it's absolutely it's something so to celebrate.
Yes.
And when that day comes, you really are aware of it. Man, I feel good and I have my energy back.
Yes. And I've been doing my best to share some of what I've learned. There are many, solving my personal voyage with that whole long haul situation required like solving a Rubik's Cube. Because I do have asthma, I did exercise a lot, and there were some other aspects. So I was just solving it, just like you'd spin a Rubik's Cube. In my personal case, there were many factors but they come to a simple conclusion, just with natural supplements. So I didn't do any pharmaceuticals of any kind and at all. It was just purely working with food, with nutrition, some of the things which I guess we're going to get into, like vitamin D. I agree with you. That's a big one. Yeah.
And that's what I did too. I think I'm probably 2.5 months out of COVID. Right. And I seem to have solved the after effects. I mean, every so often there's a little return,
right,
of I had the terrible headache and neck pain and body pain. Right. And every so often for my husband and I, there'll be just a little bit that seems very familiar to that, like a little comeback. But mostly I think we have done what you're saying, mm-hmm. the supplements and minerals and food things that we have been able to shortcut that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's been amazing. And I also used the CognoMovement ball to get my vision back and to get my brain back on track.
Yes.
With my work, I can't afford not to think.
Yeah. So there's an allergy component for people that have asthma. And I was noticing a lot of the anti-inflammatory supplements are very good. So that would be like quercetin and resveratrol can be good. But I highly recommend quercetin. If you want the short list, I'd say stick with quercetin, NAC, which helps your body make its own glutathione. And then to address my gut issues, because those were substantial and I was getting the brain fog. Mm-hmm. So, and I noticed I've got other indicators that showed gut issues. So I did colostrum and also butyrate. And then for the nervous system, to support the repair of 1.5 years of damage, alpha lipoic acid and hyaluronic acid.
Wow.
So that's the short list of what can pull people out if they happen to have some of the same things going on that I did. But it can be different for each person, interestingly.
That's a very, very good list. So the quercetin's interesting. So I started using quercetin, just because people said, for long haul COVID. So I started taking it. Well, I have a lung problem, and some of it's, I think, allergy induced, So I'm using the quercetin, and I always investigate everything I'm using. And then I found out that it is one of the best allergy treatments.
It is.
And I'm thinking, man, I'm breathing great after this. I'm not having the sinus issues. And it turns out it's quercetin.
It can also help people who have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I had tremors going on.
Wow.
And I had arthritis. I had over 200 symptoms. So the arthritis and the tremors go away too with the quercetin.
So that is such a weird disease. I mean, we were sharing off camera too. I had during my sickness what felt like over my left kidney. And since then I've talked to a number of people that was their left kidney, and it literally felt like an electrical pulse over the kidney. And I also felt like my entire body was vibrating inside. I'd reach out to my husband. I'm like, am I shaking? Because my mom did have Parkinson's. So I'm like, am I getting Parkinson's? And he's like, you're not shaking. I'm like, I'm shaking. But it was the inside of my body and weird electrical shocks.
Yes.
Well, it was such an electrical illness. That was the weirdest, the strangest thing. But I wanted to add for everybody else, I added iodine to my COVID recovery. That made a big difference. And we know a number of people whose hair all fell out. And this was one of the things that has helped them recover their hair and repair whatever is happening with the thyroid and this issue. So that was a good thing for me. It was a good discovery, and it helps me have lots of energy. So I like that.
And I also, there's something I really benefited from a lot. It's very ancient technology. It's just a ceramic or porcelain inhaler, and it looks like a salt shaker, and you put the Himalayan salt in one end, plug it up, and then you flip it over and then breathe with your mouth through the tube. It's like a pipe, and that would stop any coughing fit or any kind of congestion in my lungs. Completely would clear it up, and it would help detoxify the lungs and open up, so I could breathe beautifully. And I know some people that have been able to get off their inhalers, that they're on allergy inhalers,
Wow.
like prednisone and others, and they've been able to switch over. Not that prednisone's a bad thing, but you have to get a
Long
prescription.
term, yeah.
Yeah, long term. So with the Himalayan salt inhaler, for some people, it can, greatly reduce the dependency on prescriptions, which is good.
That's a really good one. I actually upped my salt intake. Speaking of Himalayan salt, it helps push the bromine and the chlorine and fluoride out of the thyroid. Good. So that the body can use the iodine that you're taking. So then it turns out that people are gargling with it. And some countries are highly advocating it to prevent getting sick with said plague. So also it can really increase your energy.
It does instantly.
Your body's just like
puffs on the salt inhaler and you feel like a whole new person.
It's crazy. So, it turns out your body's like a battery. Yeah. You need this electrical conductivity, and salt helps your blood be conductive and the cells be conductive. It's funny because with CognoMovement, we utilize it. The body's using a lot of salt for some reason. And we're moving a lot of energy, a lot of electricity. Right. And so we have people hold salt balls or take salt under their tongue after a session. Nice. So interestingly, since I had the plague, I have to sit while I'm working with salt balls in my hand. Sometimes, I know this is too much information, but I have one in my bra because my electricity is so great.
Right.
That and to kind of keep the electricity tame,
right.
I'm actually utilizing the salt physically as well. So,
yeah, I've heard the reason I got involved with the salt inhaler was reading that some of the miners that had worked in salt mines did not get sick, and so this is anecdotal evidence, is what it's called when there's no medical study, because there's no money in studying this.
Right.
What they'd end up with is, yes, Himalayan salt can greatly reduce your risk of disease and illness and can back off all kinds of respiratory infections if you happen to get one. They don't want to say that because there's no money for them.
On Gaia, Gaia.com, I'm trying to recall the doctor's name, but there is a series on iodine and salt. And it's called Iodine and Salt, and it's a series for thyroid. And they talk about the need for salt, this doctor, and it's amazing. He's talking about a teaspoon or two, if you're active, of Himalayan or Celtic salt.
Right.
So when I heard that, I started just putting a kernel under my tongue because I wasn't brave enough to do that much. I am now.
I drink it in water. It's like electrolytes and a little splash of lemon juice.
That's what I'm doing now too. Half the time I've got it in my glass. But I found that if I put just a little kernel of Himalayan sea salt under my tongue throughout the day, my energy by the end of the day was fantastic.
Yes.
So interesting. So
it is.
Yeah. I mean, just a little thing. And we're told not to take salt. So I know so many people who have an absolutely salt-free diet and they're getting sicker and sicker. They don't understand it's Himalayan or Celtic or natural sea and not.
We have a similar problem with the gut. And when people say like you've got acid reflux and avoid acid because you want an alkaline, it's not true, because when you're over 50, then you need the acid in your gut for the gut microbiome to thrive. And that gives you more energy. So there are a lot of misperceptions.
Yeah, there's so many things. It's so interesting, but those are great things for COVID and long haul COVID, things to know about. So, if you have it, to recover. I wanted to actually talk to you about something else.
Okay.
Plague related. So when I was sick,
to get so excited. Yay.
First of all, I thought I would never get it because we take all kinds of herbs. And I mean, the worst flu.
Exposed a few times.
Many times, directly exposed.
Yes, directly.
This time I was around someone for a half an hour who wasn't even sick yet.
Right.
I mean, I'm in my office working 12 hours a day. I don't really see that many people, but I was my daughter. She'd come home from Disneyland, and a few days later, we found out she was sick. So it was this moment in time. I didn't hug her or kiss her or drink after her, anything. I was just in the office for 30 minutes. So that was a little odd. And we, if we start to get the sniffles, like we're on the homeopathics and the herbs. And I mean, any virus is scared to death to be in my body. All the stuff we're taking, all the things. So we just rarely get sick. Or if we do, it's for a day or two. So I thought, if I get it, that'll be the case. Like,
Right.
we'll have the mild version and we'll be over it. But that was not the case. And I'd had quite a bit of stress before that. My dad had just passed away. I mean, days before. We'd had a wedding. We were involved in a bomb cyclone, if anybody knows what that is, in Mount Shasta. Weird.
Yeah, it's like, it wasn't a real cyclone, was it? It was a storm, but.
To be honest, I mean, we were under it, so I'm not sure. They called it a cyclone. Wow. At that inland, I mean, Shasta is quite a ways inland in Northern California, if you guys don't know where that is, and it's inland right on the I-5. It's not on the coast.
Right.
It really should not have been there, but it was. Crazy winds, 5 inches of rain, just nuts.
Yeah.
Weird stuff happens in Mount Shasta, but that was exceptionally strange. Anyway, that had happened. Anyway, so we got sick. Right. And we were on the herbs every hour. In fact, my husband accidentally took 500,000 units of vitamin D in a day. Because I have these tiny pills that are 50,000 units. And I thought, well, it's either going to kill him or cure him. It did not affect the sickness at all. The herbs we were taking, massive amounts of herbs, hot, everything. It didn't touch it. We were sick. We did not have the lung one. We just had brain, terrible headaches, body aches, electric shocks, but
weird stuff.
Weird stuff.
Yeah.
And my husband talked about having strange dreams.
Okay.
But when I was sick, and we slept all the time. There really wasn't anything else to do.
Right.
And you just couldn't stay awake. We were so sick. It was as though someone were right over my right shoulder teaching me. Now, this is not unusual for me in the night, right? I know you probably have something very similar. I'm constantly learning in my sleep, downloads of information. But this was like someone talking so clearly in my ear. It almost felt as though if I didn't know better, there were someone actually there. And the things I learned were incredible. So eye-opening and big ideas. Things that changed my life, changed me as a person. But in it, I was so sick. I thought, well, maybe I'm hallucinating. I didn't hallucinate. I heard some people do, but it was just this constant teaching. And so I had an awareness it was that.
Right.
Then the day that I was on my feet again, because I was down, like I couldn't get up without passing out. My husband was in the same way. I got up and I had to take my mom to the hospital. And she subsequently died 3.5 days later. So there wasn't a lot of time to think about any of that. But as I recovered from, 2 deaths, 35 days apart, a bomb cyclone, the plague, I started to realize and recall some of these things that I had been taught. And, this is my life's work. So I just started to incorporate things and utilize it, like some of us do. Well, then I started to talk to some other people within our circles who said, hey, I just want to ask you, while you were sick, were you taught things? I said, yeah. Were you? Yeah. And so I've spoken to at least 5 people who secretly are like, hey, can I ask you something? Talked about having very large consciousness upgrades. And what they say is, I know I'm not the same person. My body feels different. My consciousness is different. What I understand about this life and others is different. The funniest one, so, I teach practitioners, and so we're close with them, and a lot of them were them. But the funniest one, I was at the health food store, which I'm a pretty regular there. I even have frequent flyer miles from the health food store, if you can imagine. So the woman there, I've known her for 25 or 30 years. And she was asking me about my parents. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. You know, they did pass away. And she was shocked. And so I was kind of telling her the story. Yeah. And then I told her I had the plague. And she said, can we go outside and talk for a minute? I'm like, okay. She said, I don't want to freak anybody out. So we go outside, stand on the street corner like a couple of weirdos, you know, talking to each other. And she said, while you were sick, did you feel like something was teaching you? I'm like, oh my God, yeah. Did you? And she said, absolutely. She said, I learned so much in that, 10 days that I feel like a different person. My thinking is so different. I'm so expanded feeling. And until you walked in the door, I didn't think I could tell anybody this ever. And so I was like, oh, I got to talk to Cynthia about this, because I know that you had COVID, and I know that you also talked to a whole lot of people.
Right.
So did you experience it? And have you heard of other people experiencing this?
Gosh, well, I went through an early version of it. So it was last week of January 2021, before it was officially in
wow, yeah,
where I live. Then subsequently they said, oh, our bad. Yes, it was there. Yeah, obviously. But anyway, but when I was sick with it, first of all, it wasn't that bad. I mean, the worst of it for me was that I almost got pneumonia, but I tend toward that direction. So I was managing that part of the illness part of it. But having said that, it was like for me, it wasn't as bad as you're describing. Mm-hmm. Not yet. But then I got the extended version. It's like you get a movie,
the long haul version,
extended version. How about 16? It's like, well, for you get like a year and a half. So I got a year and a half. Wow. And during that time, that was interesting because first of all, I don't have. I think a lot of people don't have the option to take that much sick leave. Who has a year and a half off? Nobody has. So I didn't have that. So I kept working. And so what I learned, first of all, I had to shepherd resources to be able to get through a workday. So, and I'd be sleeping a lot, as you described. So that part continued. And I was definitely giving myself to a higher level of self, which I have been doing, frankly, for 20 years to be able to do the coaching work that I do. That is how I do the coaching work I do. So, and so in that state, I was familiar with the state. It's like, well, the only way I can function is to, like, here you go. So whoever you are that's above, and I think this is where we are in global consciousness. The Hopi Indians say that we are in the fourth world. The fourth chakra relates to the fourth world, and that would be the heart center. So we have mastered love. Well, there could be some argument there, but we have good examples of people who have mastered the heart chakra. And now we're moving into the throat. You know it because of the Me Too movement, cancel culture, all of this. We're dealing with expression, teaching, yes, communication, yes. And so this is where it's coming through right now.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
Right. So I was seeing that kind of thing as I was sick. And I was asking, like, is this going to kill me? Because I was in a group where there were no words for long COVID. It was not named.
Right.
It was not a thing. It was not, there was nothing on it during the time, February through about October of 2020. So it took me that long to start finding other medical researchers who happen to have long COVID. Hooray! Because then it's like, okay, we got a team. Anyway, it was something else again. But I was getting the information, like, because my question, how good can it get? I'm going to ask that. Of course I do. Every situation. So I'm asking, how good can it get? And I'm hearing, it can get pretty darn good. And I'm wondering, what am I looking at here? And then I saw the basis of what we can learn from this, which is what we started talking about, that some of these things that we can learn about now to either avert or to treat COVID or long COVID, they can be actually longevity medicine. They can be preventative. So maybe what I learned is I've got the markers for the arthritis that I was starting to get, for the tremors, but I don't ever have to get them, because now I know quercetin, for example, and other anti-inflammatories directly address that. This is not something that was ever shared with me by anybody talking with my parents or dealing with some of this. I've never heard of it. And so it's like, what a blessing, what a silver lining, what a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. And in addition, I got a lot of other upgrades. I don't want to steal your thunder though, because you got some too.
No. I want to hear. That was my question for you. I want to hear about the upgrades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some of them have to do with moving. This is what I was seeing, that collectively we're moving from the heart center. Not that we lose that, but we're considered to. Now you've got that. It's like now you know how to ride a bicycle, and so you can move on to the unicycle or something. Like, really? I'm not sure I'm ready.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so it's moving to be able to speak your truth without directly spewing fire and brimstone in someone's face. How do we communicate without the drama? And so basically I was getting visions of, this is a whole new opening for this whole planet, that we're being given an invitation to level up, to physically with longevity, emotionally with rising above the drama, and spiritually with trusting higher levels of ourself, which is what I'm doing, but I've been doing it more so. And as I trust higher and higher levels, then the expansion gets greater, which is not, some people might think, well, that's your ego expanding. No, it's not about ego at all. It's like the opposite. So I think people who are spiritual understand that. Totally not ego. Because when you're sick with long COVID, I did not know what I was doing. So the fact that I could, when I looked back and saw, I ran my website because I do my own coding. How did I do that? I paid my taxes. How did I keep my client sessions? Like how did this happen? I kept my newsletter every month. What the heck? And then I realized I put complete faith in these higher levels of self, which is what I do normally. So to me, it was like, this is what we do. And then the downloads that are coming through are epic, because it's an invitation for humanity to choose a path of relation, connection, like the woman who slowed her bicycle to a stop because she sensed something. And then and like you talking to the woman in the grocery store, because she sensed something in you and you sense something in each other.
Yeah.
And working with the animals like the gopher and the squirrel. This is something new for all of us, to recognize that there's a level of connectedness that we've never seen on this planet before.
You're really bringing up a lot of interesting things. I have had 2 experiences in the last week where I'm walking through the grocery store and someone stops me and makes a comment like, so one day I was walking through the grocery store and this woman took a double take at me. And she said, "Oh my God, you are glowing." And I'm thinking, what am I doing? What's happening? Right? I had just finished a CognoMovement session, and I think I might've been smiling because it was really a beautiful session with this man, but I don't know what else was happening. And I had that experience again just the other day. I wasn't wearing a mask in a grocery store, and here in Southern Oregon, we aren't. Some people are, some people aren't. And a woman approached me wearing a mask, and I thought, oh God, here it comes. And same kind of thing. Like she said, "Oh my gosh, you're just so beautiful. You're just glowing." And I'm thinking, that's very interesting, because I haven't done anything different about my cosmetics. They're recognizing something, they're seeing something, like the woman who stopped you, there's something that's happening that's different since this situation. And I want to say this, there's something about this I really hate, and I'll share it with everyone. So I really hate it when something terrible happens and people are like, "Oh, well, here's the good in it." I don't like the idea that you have to go through something terrible for something good to happen. So when some of our practitioners told me, "Oh, I think this is an upgrade," and 2 out of 3 of them that were sick, that were very sick, one wasn't so sick, said they got an amazing upgrade. And it wasn't that I didn't believe them. I thought maybe they were trying to, find the silver lining. And, none of us believed we'd get sick. We really didn't. So when it happened to me, I was like, oh crap, now I get what they were talking about.
Right.
I get it. So one of the things that popped into my mind recently in talking to somebody about this was that maybe it forced us to slow down so far.
Yes.
You know, one of us ended up in the hospital, the other in bed for 3 weeks. I was in bed for 2, where you can do nothing else. You probably had to slow down significantly.
I totally had to.
So that we could receive this information, that we could actually get
sleeping 13 hours a day at least. Yeah. All through that year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. So it makes me wonder if maybe that was the thing, you know, why we all ended up with it, even though all of us used herbs and things to prevent being sick. None of us thought we'd get this sick. So when we were, it was a shock. And then to find out we all had these, you know, like you said, the downloads are epic.
Right.
Because each one of us are people who get downloads of information.
Yeah.
But epic is the right word, almost indescribable.
Right.
And like you know, as you're saying, like, how did I get through? I was explaining to you, I think off camera, the same thing. I'd gone through 2 deaths, a sickness, you know, the stress of a wedding, a bomb, cyclone. I should have been grieving, for one. For me, that's a little bit different because I do have my CognoMovement tool. I knew I didn't have to suffer grief in my body. I knew that. So I did that. But there was so much stress, my body should have been desperately exhausted. And I was for a couple of weeks. And then like we created a new course, a new practitioner course. I mean, the amount of work that we got done, we should have taken a month off. We should have, but we just didn't. We kept going and doing the work that we do. So I'm hearing you saying I did the work that I do.
Yes.
That's what happened to us too. It's very interesting. And I kept thinking to myself as we're doing the work, like, what are we doing? I mean, shouldn't there be some off time for 2 deaths and the plague? I mean,
that's so funny. Well, something about the work you do, of course, it's transformation for on a personal level, but of course also a planetary level. And so I think obviously what comes to mind for me is, well, obviously you're going to be productive because what's going on with the downloads is basically paving, opening the I don't know, it's opening the it's a road. It feels like a golden glowing road. It's kind of like, here you go. It's like, this is the pathway for humanity. The whole thing lights up. And then you're so much a part of that already that it's like, why slow down now? This is what we're doing. So I think there's definitely that's how I felt when I was going through. So I'm sure it must have been that way for you too.
Well, it was funny because it never really felt like a decision. It felt like, no, we just keep going.
Yeah.
I just, you know, maybe it's insanity, but yeah, we just really kept going. And it felt even more important to continue the work, to raise the vibration. We know that every time we do the work for ourselves, we raise the vibration of the planet.
Yes.
And that seemed even more important. In fact, I'm kind of curious. I mean, totally making this up here, but you had it over a year and a half.
Yes.
You were one of the first pioneers.
Yes.
And you had to find new ways, but the new ways sound like they actually are going to make the rest of your life better, you know, with the quercetin and the anti-inflammatories and all those kind of things.
Right. And taking more rest for myself and, you know, not working so hard, so many hours in a day.
Right.
A lot can happen. I think you know this too.
Yeah.
Like you can work less hours and get more done. That's sure happening.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you probably paved the way for the rest of us. And then in the second half, like since June of 2021, the rest of us ended up, and everyone I spoke with, and I'm sure there are others, but the people that I spoke with got it from June on in 2021. We got these concentrated versions.
Wow.
Right?
Yes.
So we had to take it all at once. And I feel like there's an urgency in that maybe there was some reason. It feels like all of it feels quite urgent to me that we need to be upgrading this consciousness.
Yes.
And it's available. Like the conversations with the squirrel and the gopher, it's now available. So we need to hurry up and get there. And it seems like our work certainly has expanded, in that short time, equal to that urgency.
Something else I did in fourth quarter was an Ascension workshop, because, and I think a lot of the material for that, I noticed when I was invited to do the Ascension workshop by Alexis Brooks, she invited me, and I would have normally said no, because it was in that crazy busy time in November. But I said yes, because I realized that in the downloads I'd gotten, I already had the workshop. I'd already been given it. They gave me the workshop for, for what we do personally in this ascension time, that we are ascending, that this, keep a sense of humor with it if you can, stay positive, and recognize the signs, like seeing numbers repeating, synchronicity, things like that. And so often we see some of this, and then people can freak out when it starts happening big time. And you'll see them. I'm sure you've seen them. They just wide-eyed, like you won't believe what's happening. And I'm sure you and I would believe it. Like, okay, tell us what's happening. And they'll say, this is really weird. And we'll say, just go for it. As weird as you want.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that's happening. And it's there is a huge ascension process going on right now. And the way I'm seeing it is that it's bringing out our ability to speak up and talk about things that we had never talked about, or it's been culturally squelched. And there's still, you can see signs of that happening in the world stage right now, but it's too late. It's like the voices are coming out, and this new world is being born. It's already here. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what it feels like to me too. We're already there. Yes. I was speaking to another friend of mine who calls and loves to have weird conversations, right? And the expansion, I mean, the kind of conversations we're having are like, phew, huge. I mean, amazing. And so much better. But we were talking about this idea of the, moving into the fifth dimension and ascension and the veil thinning.
Yes.
And I said, what I think, what it feels like to me, that there's going to be a moment in time when all of a sudden we see what it all is really like, what's really here. And all of this stuff, aliens, fairies, gnomes, tree people.
Amazing animals, squirrels and gophers.
Yeah, animals, talking to you, like they're going to just start talking.
Bringing gifts.
That it's all right here. It's already here.
Yes.
Just haven't been able to see it.
Right.
And now that we're moving that vibration up and up, we're seeing more and more of what's always been here all along. And it'll just be like, oh, right. Okay, cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's part of what people get a taste for, is that light body awareness when they're so knocked out by the COVID and healing with it and getting those upgrades, realizing and the downloads, it's just recognizing, okay, this is who I am. And everybody sees me that way. This is the true reality.
Yes. So that's so interesting. Bill McKenna, for everybody out there, founder of CognoMovement, we were just having this conversation. We've had some amazing series of conversations, and our work has shifted very quickly after COVID to that becoming the core of who you really are. Like we really are less of the programs that we used to be. So I'll share this one thing with you. Crazy. I was trying to get all this work done, all the things. And I have both of my parents' estates to handle. And we lost my brother a year before that. And so I'm still handling his estate and trying to get the work done and handling life, my mom and a wife and that kind of stuff. And so I didn't have time to do my ball and exercise, which I need to do both, but I have time. So I decided to do it together on a mini trampoline. So I use a wall to do my CognoMovement. And so I'm on the mini trampoline and I'm like a nutcase, doing CognoMovement. And there was something I wanted to do, or something happening. And all of a sudden I felt this feeling in my body. For me, it's the back of my throat and the top of my solar plexus. And I'm like, whoa, that is so familiar. So I took myself back on a little journey into the past to all the other places I had felt that specific feeling. Whoa, it was there when I was in high school and wanted to maybe try out for a play. It was there when I did things that didn't quite work out so well. It was there. I followed it all the way back to 4 years old, that same. So of course I worked my CognoMovement and kind of cleared that feeling. But I realized in that moment that it was the core feeling that had stopped me most of my life and had literally built the parameters, the fence line. There it was, every time. So I started to notice it throughout the day, how many dang times that little feeling came up. Maybe I needed to buy airline tickets for something. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I don't have enough money. Well, yeah, I do, but and it would maybe prevent me from buying those airline tickets for 3 or 4 days. No logical reason, just this sensation.
Right.
And I knew it wasn't an intuitive thing either. Wasn't an intuitive hit that I shouldn't fly. It was this fence line. So I would take a minute and clear it out. And all of a sudden I realized that was part of my scaffolding. I was built on that feeling that was stopping me. And now it's not. So as it fell away, guess who emerged? That kid before 4 that was like, woohoo, look what I can do. I'm a unicorn and Superman all at the same time. Look at my red boots, right?
Love it.
But also the strength that came up in me that was like, oh, actually, here I am. This is who I really am.
Right.
I thought I was that sensation in my body that stopped me. And turns out I'm totally not. So, that furthered our work so incredibly, but what you're saying resonates with me so much. We really are becoming who we are without all the rest of that stuff.
Right.
And just that upgrade alone allows us to, think absolutely differently. Think without the fence lines, think without the bars on.
Right.
And act differently and do differently and receive differently. So for me, that's been one of the most amazing little mini discoveries on a trampoline while doing CognoMovement.
It's like access to light body is granted, you got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just different. And it's so funny because I always say this, we always think like enlightenment is like, oh, and rainbows and, lightning bolts and maybe Zeus shows up and a unicorn. There's so many unicorns, but realistically, when you make that little step upward, it just feels like, oh yeah, right. Okay. Yep.
Well, I think that's that saying, right? Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah. Maybe just a little more efficiently, right?
Right. You're doing it with so that you notice that the animals have done stuff for you. And it's like you're seeing the elves, the fairies, and the unicorns.
Oh, yeah. So interesting. So I had another topic having to do with this that I wanted to ask you about specifically. Yes. So you're the queen of timeline jumping, and holy crap, it really feels like every 5 seconds there's a timeline jump. I realized last night. So what happens for me is the pressure in the room will change, and I'll hear boom, in my hearing, like my ears pop. And it seems for me that the bigger the pressure change, the bigger the timeline change. And there were 2 just last night. So I know in talking before, we know we're moving through so many during a day, shifting and changing. So I had this astrological reading, and I really have never been into astrology so much. There's a lot of math and I don't math, so I never have been into it. And I had a chart, and, I'd been through all this crazy time, and a friend of mine had a reading, and it was showing, her business changing and this really ramped up time. And I kind of I thought in the back of my mind, well, maybe if I have a reading, they'll tell me things are going to be easier, because I'd just been through deaths and the plague and a bomb cyclone and, all the thing. And so I went ahead and had this reading. And what was crazy is that whole nutty time didn't even show up on my chart at all. So it got me thinking, this is a question for Cynthia. You come in with a chart, right? Supposedly, and it's your whole life and all the things and what you're supposed to do.
Right.
But then you timeline jump 1,000 times in a week.
Right.
How does that, what do you think about this? How does that affect your chart?
That's a great question. Yeah, I used to do charts, but first by hand when I was in high school. I had a girlfriend, and that we were nerds, so we're just doing astrological charts by hand. Like we did our own, then we did our parents, then our siblings, and we're just going nuts with it. And then I was learning how to program, so I did like the math, and I thought I can do this mathematically. And anyway, long story short, I was really geeking out on the chart part of it. What I learned was to interpret the charts and looking at the way the astrologers would interpret it. That's really an art, and there's so much intuition and wisdom that goes deeply into that art. It's there's a lot to it. Okay, but then to answer your question, one thing one more small thing that ties in totally, and that is if you've ever noticed that you read your horoscope, and if you believe in astrology, chances are quite good that what you read for that day is going to completely resonate. And if it doesn't seem true to begin with, it will pretty soon throughout that day, usually. And this ties in with your question too, believe it or not. And then someone who doesn't believe in astrology, this is where it's interesting. If you've got your skeptic and they're just dead set against it, like there's no way, no how, doesn't make any sense at all. That's not even going there. And so they would look at their horoscope and laugh at it and, be able to mock it, read it out loud, do a little video. I've seen people do that, like, here's my horoscope. Ha, hogwash, this is malarkey. Okay, fascinating. It's fascinating to me because I do have this interest in what is going on in this communication with us and the cosmos. It's a two-way conversation. And if we assume, here's where it gets interesting, because if you assume this classical view of the cosmos, in other words, there's one objective reality, and what's physical is all there is, blah, blah, blah. And so, the moving finger writes and having writ moves on, and nor all your piety nor wit can ever go back and change a single word of it, all that stuff. Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. But if you recognize, wait a minute, we're in a quantum multiverse, holographic multiverse, most likely. And if you recognize and acknowledge, what does that mean? It means that when I believe in my horoscope and I get it in my email basket, I look at it, I glance at it to see, like, how does it resonate? Often it's like, well, that's already true. Wow. And it's usually validation, and it gives me a chuckle, a laugh. If I don't see it, then I know I'll see this by the end of the day, whatever it is. Like, this will be interesting. Sometimes it's like, don't have time for this. But anyway, but to get to your question, what you experienced was fascinating, really fascinating. Because here you've got, this sounds like the natal chart interpretation, where you're looking and then you go forward with it through time and see, based on projected with the planets at your time of place of birth, carefully calculated, then you can go forward and see when are the challenges in your life? What will they look like? Now, if you take this quantum perspective, that things are changing. So in other words, what I'm reading the horoscope that resonates for me because I'm self-selecting it. It's kind of like there's a conversation between me and the multiverse. So it's giving me what I need to know that'll correct me. It'll give minor course corrections for my day. So if I feel like, gosh, this is a hard day, and I see the horoscope, yep, it's a hard day. Good, I thought so. Well, I can deal with it now.
Okay.
They gave it to me straight. But then when you go through a tough time like you did, and you get back this weird thing, like, looks peachy keen, looks like nothing. Like, wait a minute, what happened here? Then it's another way of confirming that quite likely you've been through one or many, many more quantum jumps to the level that what the life you're living is not necessarily what you've seen. It could be just enough to show you this moment. Because what I noticed and what you've described too, like you had two little pops and shifts in one night. Just think how many are happening throughout a given week or a month or a year. And so with all those changes, the odds that you're going to see something that's set in stone from the time of your birth and it completely matches what's happening, you can get that to match. You can get it. Like, I'm getting my daily horoscopes to match. But you can also witness something like what you saw, which could, depending on how you are framing it, like, you don't strike me as a skeptic. I don't think you were avoiding the horoscopes. So then it's interesting. You're open-minded and you're wondering, I would have liked to have seen, I'd like to know, will things get better? And instead you're getting like tabula rasa, like what? Kind of like, it's almost like write your own story. Like the horoscope is there. It seems like there's a meta message in it for you, which is basically, it can be whatever it needs to be. And there's a collaborative, to me, it's always a collaborative co-creation. So that's my bias based on what I play with astrology regularly, the way I described, just every day looking at it, playing with it, just like, what will it show me? And I like to look for the predictions on the at the beginning of each, on my birthday in January. I look at the year. I take the projection of all the astrologers giving their, here's your prediction for the year. I create a little document, and I like to look back at it at the end of the year and see, was that true? What happened? How would I see it now? And what did I see going forward? What did it look like before it happened? What did it look like after? That's really interesting. And also, because I experienced quantum jumps, do I remember it differently? Is this the same thing that I thought that I'd created on my birthday last year, or does the document look different? Boy, that can happen too. So with this, it's like we're playing that Quidditch game, the Harry Potter game in the air. Like the ball is flying and what's going on? It's crazy.
Yeah, that's kind of what it seemed like to me. I thought, okay, first of all, that whole period of time, that 6 months, on top of all the weird stuff that's happened in the last few years, 2 years, right? Yeah. None of that felt like real life to me half the time. I kept thinking, am I going to wake up at some point? Because really, I'm not kidding. I really, it felt so strange. And I've talked to so many people who aren't into metaphysical, and they'll really say, this doesn't feel like real life. And I always find that so curious, right? So when this whole strangeness began back in October, and it was kind of just an extension of other strangeness, it kept feeling less and less like real life and more like, did we take a left turn somewhere? Did we take a left turn off the highway into an unpaved road and did not realize it? Like, what is going on here? It had that sense. It wasn't like, you're just trudging through a hard time. It really felt like, okay, somebody's pulling a prank here. This is not right. And then to find out, so I thought, okay, so I'm not very familiar with astrology. It's not that I didn't believe in it. First, I didn't understand it that well because of the math. But it was, a complex thing that I just never had studied. So I just didn't know anything, but I assumed it would show up because it's a big thing. I'd heard like a death of a parent, and it was all the things. And what I was really hoping it would show like this terrible time, but then, woo, everything's great. It did not. It didn't show that at all. And the astrologer was like, looked baffled. When I told her, I said, well, I've just been through, and she looked and she said, I can't make anything fit. Nothing. Normally you would see that the death of a parent or this, something significant, 2 deaths of a parent in 35, that might show up. Nothing. Well, what was weird that did show up. And like I said, she didn't know me. She doesn't really know what I do. My work showed up in the chart and almost nothing else. So the South Node and the North Node, the South Node, she was like, kind of almost apologetically telling me all these things I would have to go through. And there's this and that. And as she described it, my daughter here with me, we're looking at each other. We're like, well, that's something we do in CognoMovement. And so is that and that. So I have these two pie, the pie charts on and this one's full and this one's full and none of the others have anything in them. And as she walked it through, every bit of it is the work I do today. And what she was so apologetically telling me I was going to have to go through, I'm like, oh, I've already done all that. We're doing it. Like, that's what I do daily. And then the North Node was where we're going. And it was like somebody created a chart that was my work and said, here you go. There it is. That was very, very interesting. But it really didn't show much of anything else, except for that she thought it looked like I'd be doing it for 30 years. That's
Yay.
it.
Good for us. Yay for us.
Yeah. So interesting though, right? I was not what I expected, but it's so funny because you were literally the first thing I said to my daughter, we have to ask Cynthia about this. I wonder if this is a result of so much timeline jumping. And with CognoMovement, we're even timeline jumping more specifically on purpose.
Right.
Like I was saying, every time I removed that core feeling, normally that would have meant that I would have not done something. And now I'm removing that and I'm immediately doing that thing.
Interesting.
So, I'm changing the trajectory. So even if you don't believe in timelines, dimension jumping, which I do, but even if you didn't, if you change the trajectory of your day or your life, and each decision you make has the potential of changing the trajectory of your whole life.
Yeah.
If you're doing that 14 times a day, you're likely to end up somewhere else than you might have normally gone.
That's very true. And this reminds me of some of the I've heard, I don't know it directly, but I've heard from various sources that apparently there had been some time travel government groups that were tracking this, and they were unable to see past a certain year, like 2012 or something, because there was so much what you might call, what we're doing, timeline jumping, that starts occurring there. It's just a hairball of timelines, and they can't tell anything. And so if they were in charge of doing the equivalent of an horoscope or astrological projection, they wouldn't be able to tell either. It's very interesting because maybe the fixed part of it is the work you're doing. And that's what's the soul print and the soul plan. And the rest of it, you'd think it would be very important, but maybe what your work is so important that stands out.
The truth is I've always kind of had suspected that was my one job here. And just for a lot of years, I resisted it,
Yeah.
But that it was always the whole reason. Anyway,
Oh, gosh.
But it's so interesting what you said, that maybe if you shift a timeline,
right,
and now you do a horoscope in this timeline, if you were to travel it all the way back to your birth, that horoscope would be exactly correct. It would seem like it fits.
Right.
But then you jump to the next one, and that horoscope's going to follow. If you follow that timeline back to where you might have been born, it would fit.
Right.
So maybe you wouldn't have any idea what the one you were actually born with looks like.
Right. And we naturally do a lot of timeline jumps too, just in nature. So we're without people noticing that they're doing it usually. And that's what I originally was tracking, was what I was calling reality shifts. So yeah, it's fascinating. Really interesting. These are great questions. Well, I love the way your mind works. I love your sense of humor about it. A lot of people would be upset, but you're so interested in learning, and you got such a great sense of humor.
Well, I'll share something else with you and everybody who's listening that might be useful, but it is how my weird brain thinks. I sat with 3 people as they took their last breath over the last 2 years. It just so happens that I was the person in the room, and I happened to be there with them as they took their transition. And this is not funny, and it's kind of funny. We actually, when my mom passed, and the next day I had to call the funeral home, I looked at my daughter and I said, I wonder if I should ask for a punch card. And she said, that is hilarious and not funny at all. Anyway, my weird brain. But what I noticed is their deaths taught me so much. As I sat with them, I realized that each of their nervous systems did what it did until the very last minute of their life, to their last breath. So for example, my dad was just everybody loved him. they just loved him. Babies loved him. It was like he was covered in sugar. He's a very sweet and kind, loving man. But in his last years, he became nonverbal. He had Alzheimer's. And, there was a lot of times they become combative and that kind of thing. He never did any of that. But there was no communication. Every so often a look, maybe a wink. If he was present that day, he might touch your hand. But he couldn't get up and move around. He was basically just a being that sat there, no communication. But caregivers would say, I just love your dad. I just love him. And I would think, I don't know what you're talking about. You can't talk to him. What are you loving, right? But his nervous system was radiating this calm. Everything's okay.
Yes.
And in his last breaths, in his last days, he just closed his eyes and everything was okay. He just slowly left the building.
Right.
And that's who he was as a human. Mm-hmm. And my mom was a fighter. And also there was an alligator around every corner. She lived with a lot of fear. Mm-hmm. An amazing human. I mean, she saved so many lives. She's an incredible person, talented and creative, but she was a fighter, and she had these fears. And her last days, though she was not conscious, that's what her nervous system did. She was fighting with somebody and, and in a fear state. And I thought, there they are. How much of what we do is based on these nervous system setups that in my work we can change.
Right.
And with my brother, the same thing. Your nervous system does what it does till the very last second. The body is in its natural, it's almost like a homeostasis for the body, unless you switch it. So, it magnified for me this need to change those autonomic programs if they're not serving us. In my dad's case, I think his setup served him well, and then maybe in some cases it didn't, but for the most part it did. In my mom's case, those weren't serving her well. But that the body does what it does until the last minute. So that was something I learned through this experience. So
that's beautiful. Well, I haven't been with people as they were dying, but I've been shortly afterward. And one was a stranger, and that's an interesting experience. I felt inspired. My angels guides were like, go read a book in the park today. So I went to a park I've never been to, parked in front of a police station, noticed this is weird. And it was, I think, closed. And then I heard people yelling in the park. I thought, great. I picked the park to read a book in, and everybody's shouting. And then I listened to what are they shouting? And they're in a canyon, and something about she's here, she's down here. And I'm like, what the heck? So I walked down in the canyon, and then I somehow I did a beeline right to a dead body, like not knowing what I'm doing. Wow. That was the her they're talking about. They're calling paramedics. She's going into rigor mortis, and she's holding a dog's leash. So I could still remove it. I took the dog's leash, from her. And I noticed, I stayed close to the body because the paramedics were coming, and they're still hollering through the canyon. And then they show up, and I've already read the tag. It shows an address and a name. So I feel like I've got information about who this person might be. But they're barking orders because that's what they do. Like, get out, clear the area. Like, okay. And so, but I just hollered back at them. I think I might know who she is and where she lives, if that's of any interest. Like, give us the caller tag. Like, okay. But I memorized it. And then I was able to walk the dog to the police station that was closed, but there was someone there that greeted me. I quickly learned this was not about reading a book, partway through this one. Yeah. Like, okay, I did not come here for the book.
Yeah, clearly not the book.
Right. So I took the dog to the police station. It's a very interesting story, though. But then I had all kinds of communications with that woman, and finding, getting her dog to a safe home. And it was a fascinating experience. And then my grandmother, I was with her shortly after she died, minutes after, even though she lived in a different town. I was not the contact person. She lived 90 minutes away by car, but I happened to drive there. I was there for a book event that I did not schedule, but the bookstore called to confirm. And if you're an author, you don't break, once they've confirmed something, like I'm supposed to be there for a book event. Well, I guess I'll be there. really, I scheduled this? I didn't schedule this, but you know, it's another quantum jump, clearly.
Yeah.
And this was interesting because again, that book reading, the store was just a very short distance from my grandmother's nursing home. So I planned to go see her. And on the drive there, I got visions of her full life review, the parts I was in. And I didn't know she was gone. And I also got information my sister had been there the day before. Turned out to be true. And I show up, her door is closed, which it never is at the nursing home. And I said, may I go in? What's going on? They said, you got here quickly. And I'm like, what? What's going on? And they thought I was my sister. But they had like the wrong phone number. Everything was kind of messed up. And it turned out my grandmother had just passed away. She was still warm to the touch. And I started crying because she was my favorite person in my whole family.
Aww.
But I could see her spirit standing behind her body. Her body was a shell. And then I could see the glowing form of her. And now this part fits what you're saying. She was the most faith-based spiritual person I've ever met. And next to her was Jesus Christ, who she adored. I could see them. And so I could see she's fine. And I'm just bawling my eyes out.
Yeah, yeah.
Then I can't drive home either because I'm like, that was my favorite person in the world.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. But I could see she's fine. And that faith she had, boy, was it with her. And she's not in her body. She's right there. And, you know, I had to take several hours to calm down before I could drive. But it was amazing. Amazing.
So interesting in both of those. You know, it's like you allow yourself to be guided to the right place. I do that too. Sometimes I end up in the weirdest places. And now I know just to wait. And pretty soon it'll be revealed while I'm there, you know, why I'm in that position and who I'm supposed to talk to and whatever I'm supposed to do. I think we're probably a little unusual in that.
Maybe not so much anymore. I think we're getting the planetary upgrades. So maybe we used to be unusual, but now it's going to be, have you seen any amazing people recently?
Exactly. Have you seen any amazing people recently? Well, in my work, I get to see a lot of amazing people and hear so many amazing stories. And it's funny because they're starting to become normal. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 5 or 6 of those I've heard of, right? Where before you'd be like, mind blown.
Right.
Now we're like, oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's pretty normal now. And interestingly, a lot of people who aren't in this community, you know, who aren't actively working on Ascension, who aren't teachers, are having these experiences also.
Right.
So I think that's that issue of people saying, this doesn't feel like real life,
right.
You know?
And that's part of why I created that Ascension workshop, which is available online. And there's a link on my website to it on the events page. So even though it happened already, it's still there. So it's a timeline traveler too.
You know what I would recommend for anybody who's curious to take it, because there are so many of those things that if you didn't know, or at least think you know what's happening, you would think you were losing your mind or becoming quite ill.
Right.
You know, one of my friends was talking about, she called me one day and she said, I have to tell you something. She said, I don't know if I should be worried, but people will call me a lot of times with their health things, even though I'm not even close to being a doctor, but they do. I don't know if I'm worried or if it's something else. I'm like, okay. And she was saying that she would wake up with this vibration. And this was before COVID, her body vibrating inside. And, you know, a number of us had been experiencing that for some time, waking up with that sensation.
Yes.
And I said, well, I've spoken to a lot of people who are having that same thing. And so am I. So it's probably not an illness. Get it checked out. But I think that's an Ascension symptom. Mm-hmm. So if some of that stuff is happening, a class like yours might really help explain what's going on and help the people to use it. Right. For us, I don't know, you know, maybe we are unusual in this, but I've utilized each and every one of these things to expand the expansion even further, the Ascension, you know, knowing that helps so much. So of course you made that class. Of course it's very timely. So if people can still take it, that would be incredible.
And it did come through the downloads from the COVID and the long COVID. So it's part of this big meta message for us all, if you want to look at it that way. And you got some downloads too. Do you want to give us an example little
Yeah,
taste?
I do. I have about 2 more minutes.
Okay.
They're very esoteric
Right.
but I'll share if it resonates with anyone. One was very interesting and has to do with timelines. And these things were visual. They were shown to me,
Right.
the timeline, and that these things that we believe we want really are the things that have to do with purpose, that we all really do know what they are. People say, I don't know what purpose is. Yeah, you do. You've always known. You just maybe aren't willing to admit it, or maybe you feel like it's too big for you, but you kind of know. You really know.
Yeah.
And that those are basically on your timeline already, almost like hiding your own Easter eggs. It's there.
Right.
And it's drawing you forward. It's calling you. And that's that sensation. And I think some people feel like it feels like a resistance or stress, or I'm not thinking about the right word, but that feeling like, oh, I can't have it. I can't have it. Well, it's actually just you putting your feet in the ground and resisting it. It's already there. So, and other things, the things that you want, the things that matter, that are really what you're supposed to be doing, this that you came to do, you plan to do them. They're already there and they're drawing you. They're pulling you forward. And if you just follow the breadcrumbs, kind of like you and I do,
Yes.
and let go of that resistance, you end up there sometimes faster than you could ever imagine. And sometimes all it is as simple as letting go of the resistance, and now it shows right up because it's already there. So that was one of the big ones. The other one was very interesting too. It was, and this one, you have to decide what to make of it. But it was really that, Cynthia, I don't exist. I'm you. I'm one aspect of you. And you like my weird mind.
I do.
It's really yours. And so how I've utilized that is, after I came out of being sick, anything that bothered me, especially in someone else, I shifted and became them. Our clients that come to our seminars, I realize they're us. They really are when they show up. And man, do they teach us stuff. And every individual client, I get something out of it. And our practitioners say that too. Every time my client comes, I learn something.
Yes.
Well, it's because it's actually you. So you don't actually exist. You're me. So the tool really is that seeing yourself, seeing the other person as you. When it's you that's being a jerk, you have a lot more compassion. You have your reasons.
Hopefully so.
When it's somebody else, you don't have so much compassion because their reasons aren't yours. But when you realize, oh my gosh, this is just a reflection of me.
Right.
Now, what do I do about that? I fix me. I change me. And miraculously, everyone around me changes too. So those were two of the things that were, I want to say, installed, because sometimes I would have to fight with those ideas for a while.
I know, because we've talked about subjective and objective reality, and that was before you had the COVID, and now you're in it. You got it. It's like, yep, got it, done and dusted. But before it was kind of like, what does that, what would that feel like? And then boom, now you know.
Yeah, it's like walking right into it. So those were two. There were so many. But what I did was I just started adapting them to what I'm already doing, what I already know.
Right.
And like I said, some of them now I just know fully in my body. I know the whole thing. It's all right there. But because I'm a teacher like you, I can translate it very, very quickly. Now I can put it into words and tools that I can share and that really have made an uptick in the consciousness of the people around me. So I think really that's probably the reason, I probably, like you, are a good translator of this kind of info. So
that's what I love about these conversations we have, because I feel like this is a precious moment in time in our lives that we're sharing, and it's spontaneous, it's real. I think this is so important for all the subjective experiences of all the other us's who might.
Exactly. Well, if they're listening, They're probably one of us too.
Well, I know. Well, I've gotten feedback on when I posted. Thank you for letting me share the video last time, and people really love it. They love the conversation, and we go on for a long time.
Yeah, it's
I'm
true.
thinking they listen to that whole thing. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Oh, well, the inside of two weird minds. That's true. I love that you said you and your friend were nerds doing astrology back in college, because I'm like, oh, I don't think that's nerdy at all.
It was
Well,
high school. I was
high school. Well,
yeah, it was really. But back then, believe me, it was nerdy.
yeah, I think it's cool. Anyway, Cynthia, I have to run, but oh my
Okay.
gosh, I am so happy to have this time with you,
Me
and so
too.
happy to get your insights on these things that I experienced. And I know so many others are too. So
I'm so glad you're bringing these things up too. You're the first, you're right on the cutting edge of so much because of CognoMovement, because of who you are. So thank you for all the work you're doing, because it really is so special to me to spend that time with you. You're a pioneer right now on Earth.
oh, thank you. But evidently, according to my horoscope, I don't think I had a choice.
Yay. Well, that was probably all the rest of us voting. Like, she
Yeah,
doesn't
all
get
the
a
voting.
choice.
Thank her to it. All right, my friend. So
Love you
much
so
big
much.
love to you. Thank you so much for this chat. And I will see you again so soon.
Bye for now.